Next speaker is Ms. Caterina Vidulli. Caterina is the communication leader of the Society project, and she's also the CEO of Central Market Intelligence, which is partner of the Society project, and is an SME dealing exactly with market intelligence and data analysis. So she will tell us about the potential of universal design for tourism. So Caterina, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorenzo. Yes, so we conducted a market research to start the site project from the right point of view, and also to answer a very important question, that is, how much can really the universal design principles improve the travel experiences? Because we have listened to all the principles, and I think we all agree that they're great, and we should do something about that. But the problem is most of us still think, yes, but it's just a small part of the population that actually need those improvements. So it's something that can wait. So we needed to start understanding who are the four key demographic groups, that are more affected by all those problems, to understand how many they are, which are their needs, and how much improving the situation, the travel experiences, can really have effect on them. So the four key groups are the people, of course, with different types of impairments and disabilities, meeting mobility, sensory, cognitive needs, and everything that has already been said. Then seniors, so people that usually are older than 65 years old. Families with children, so people that are traveling with small children, and people with food allergies. So this is something that's mostly neglected, but it's a very important problem. And also pregnant women, for example, have this temporary problem, so they need to have different ways to order at the restaurants. So those are the most important groups, but they are not the whole, of course, types of problems. But if we start thinking about them and projecting and planning experiences, starting from them and then including everyone, then the situation could improve. So let's deep dive into each group. How many are the people with disabilities? So how many people need really help? Worldwide, 16% of the global population have a form of disability. So it's 1.3 billion people. In Europe, that's 27%. That means more than 100 million Europeans that have a sort of form of disability, most of them musculoskeletal, so mobility disability. And there are differences between the countries. We have found in our research that there are many studies about the different percentages of people with disabilities in each country. So, of course, if you want to read the full research, it's available. And now we don't have the time to look at everything, but we can understand that there are different situations, and that even looking at age groups, the level of disability increase, of course, with age, but even the low age ranges still have a very relevant percentage of people that experience a form of disability. So our study looked more in depth about Italy and Croatia, of course, because it's the focal point for the program, but it's possible to have the same level of attention for each country, of course. So in Italy, there are more than 12 million people that are characterized by some form of limitations, and in Croatia, more than 1 million people. We can see from this graph that shows every country in Europe that Italy is here with this percentage around 20% of the population, while in Croatia it's around 30% of the population. Then every study has different ways to define what's a limitation, and so disabilities can be defined in many different ways. But we can still understand that it's a very important part of the total population. And also elderly people, of course, it's a cross group, because as we've seen before, when the age increases, it's normal to have more problems. But the population, it's generally aging. Globally, it's aging. If you think that in 2019, 1 in 11 people was senior, now 1 in 6 people is senior. So that's a happy problem, we can say, because medicine improved our lifestyle, and so we can live longer. But that's a kind of problem because we need new infrastructures, new services to address this change. But at the same time, the happy news is that more senior people travel. So after the pandemic, they started to travel more, and now 1 out of 3 people that can be defined senior actually travel once a year. In Italy, it's 32%. In Croatia, it's 30%. So it's an increasing tendency, but we still have two seniors out of 3 who are not traveling. So that's the point. We need also to understand how to help the 1 out of 3 who is traveling, but how to make the others to start doing that. So this is a very important point. And for these 2 groups, the problems are common. So the consequences of their problems are not having difficulties while traveling, because people with disabilities and seniors, 25% of them report difficulties compared to 10% of people without disabilities. So for them, it's really harder to travel, and we'll see how later. They have more financial difficulties because people with disabilities struggle more in covering their expenses. They usually don't own credit or debit cards, and that's common also for senior people because they find difficult to perform online payments, so also booking travel tickets or whatever should be done online. And they have difficulties in navigation, online navigation, both seniors and also people with mobility problems or also sight problems or cognitive problems. So these problems are relevant to a very important part of the population. The third group, the families. Also, families are an increasing trend because the travel for families is growing. The year after year percentage is near 5%, and so in 2022, nearly 400 million travels in Europe have been performed with children. So it's a relevant number. And children really influence the trip planning. 76% of parents said that they actually, when planning the trip, they think about what to do with their children, and they choose hotels instead of other forms because it's easier for them. And they mostly travel in summer because it's easier to organize everything. So if we want to reduce this seasonality, it's very important to give them a way to travel in different ways. And also their habits is to travel near home. So national destination, it's not so easy to organize abroad trips. So a very important group. And then the food allergies, we think it's something not very common, but actually 20 million Europeans have some form of food allergy, and it's increasing. It's more important for children. 1 in 4 school age has a form of allergy. For example, the celiac disease, it's very, very important also because just 1 out of 4 received a diagnosis. So it's another important thing to understand and to think for. And people with food allergies really experience stress in traveling because it's difficult to find where to eat, and also they don't feel safe to travel among other people. So it's another group that can be addressed to improve their experiences. So those 4 groups actually have problems while traveling, and there are more than 257 million tourists, 1 in 5, that can have specific requirements. And so the requirements can be divided into the phases of a trip. So in planning the trip, so we found evidence of different case studies and different surveys made on those 4 groups, where we summarize everything here. So in the trip planning phase, the challenges are lack of reliable information about the accessibility they will find when arriving at the destination. There are problems in booking and reserving their trips. Websites are without accessibility features, so it's a very important discipline actually to make websites easy to read and understand. And there are no information on food options or limited information. So when planning, people cannot understand, but if I'm going there, if I'm booking that restaurant or that hotel, will it be possible there to have the food options I need? So pre-planning is one important phase when people should improve, we could improve their experience. The second point is the navigation and orientation. So when arriving at the destination, it's difficult to understand. For example, in airports or in ports, it's difficult to understand where to depart. There are no adequate signage, and so it's difficult to orientate inside the areas. It's hard to find restrooms or elevators, and the photos online sometimes don't match the physical space, so they don't know actually how to move. There are also problems during the experience in traveling and moving. So problems with local transportation, risk of damage to the mobility aids, and the accommodation often not meeting accessibility. So that's an issue, and we can see that accommodation is one of the most important points to address. The fourth, it's a sort of crossing phase. It's the fact that the staff usually it's not trained to assess these problems, so they cannot help in a positive way. And so negative experiences then make people with any special needs not to travel anymore or to travel less often. So train staff and also ensure that the communication is enough to sustain their problem. It's something that's very, very important. So all the data sets show that these are the most important problems. Then the second part of the research was different, was understanding how many people know about universal design and about the fact that they need to ask for accessible solutions. So universal design, is it something that's common or not? And how to understand it? Well, first thing, we looked at how many papers there are. So there are some papers about universal design, most of them about design, architecture, and also about education. So there are some scientific papers mostly, but according to people, are people looking for that? And one way to look at that, it's understanding how many people are searching for it. Because, when you look for something, you need an information, you want to verify something you have heard, you look on Google. You start from your website, from Google website, to understand if there are some websites with information about that. So how many people actually are searching for universal design on Google compared to accessibility? So the common topic of accessibility, all the different keywords that can be associated with accessibility. So we see that the topic of accessibility increased starting from 2016, and now we are in the highest peak of interest for accessibility. The topic of designing things to be accessible. Well, for universal design, the topic is kind of one out of, it's the half, kind of. It was the half, because this is a trend showing the main point is 100, and the others are relative points. So here we can see that, actually, no, sorry, not the half, but this was kind of 50 and this was kind of 5, so 10 times more. Now it's like 100 more, so you're here like 10 times more the interest for universal design, accessibility than universal design now. What does it mean? Of course, that universal design is still a very, very low niche that only people working in the field understand. And looking at the absolute numbers of searches, for this was in Italy, universal design for learning, for example, is searched 2,400 times per month. So it's something, 2,400 per month, but it's for learning, not for tourism, of course, and not in general. So universal design is something more associated with learning, education, and also architecture. In Italy, the interest started to grow since 2022, and now there are a total or nearly 70,000 Google searches per month about the topic of universal design, nothing about tourism. In Croatia, the number is kind of 0. So using the keyword universal design in Croatia, something was found, but the average volume per month was 0. So the interest is 0. No one is looking for that. So what does it mean? That we need to educate. We need to understand that that's a different approach. As we have seen before, accessibility is just a part. Universal design is something more, of course, universal, that approaches different things. So it's very important to start disseminating this topic. The second part of this analysis was about the knowledge of people was, okay, but how many people are searching for accessible travel? So they don't know, they need to ask for universal design because it's something that's true for people working in the field, but are they looking for accessibility? And so we looked at searches that added the words for travel, like hotel, accommodation, travel, beaches, and so on, with the keywords like for disabled people, for seniors, for children, and so on, to understand if people are looking for that. And we did that in Italy and in Croatia. For the accommodations, in Italy, nearly 0.06%, so 67,000 out of 104 million searches were including keywords about disability, so or children or seniors. So what does it mean? That in Italy, every month there are more than 100 million searches of the keyword hotels or accommodation, but just a small percentage is adding keywords to understand if hotels are the ones they want, so the ones with accessible services. In Croatian, actually, we found more than 4 million searches of hotels and the words in Croatian, but no searches with the keywords for this accessibility. Of course, this search could be improved by adding many more translations, but the point is that we need to understand the ranges. So what's the percentage? So since the percentage is so low, reducing the total number, of course, the percentage is reduced. So also the absolute numbers is near zero. So the point is to understand what's the relevance of that. For travel, the percentage was a little higher, but still very low. For holidays, so holidays for seniors, for children, was a little bit higher. On museums, kind of 0.55, so in the middle. Beach is very, very low, and airports even lower. So just some examples to see what I'm talking about. So for example, vacanze con bambini, that means trips with children, is searched 1.3 thousand times per month in Italy. Or vacanze per anziani, so trips for seniors, it's nearly 990 searches per month. Or vacanze per disabili in carrozzina, that means holidays for people in wheelchairs, it's 720 searches per month. So not zero, it's relevant, but it compared to how many people are just looking for trips or holidays accommodation, it's very low. What does it mean? That we need to improve this number. We need, of course, to let them know they can ask for accessible services and solutions. And we need also to address the needs of those who are already asking for that. And in Croatia, the numbers are lower. For some keywords, we detect the keywords for many keywords, but the average number is zero. So it's less than 10 per month for 1 year. So we can see that there is a signal, but the signal is very weak. Okay, so that's something that we need to change. We need to work for improving it. And I'm concluding with some considerations. So the market potential is kind of higher because the global spending of people traveling with some form of disability is kind of $95 billion annually. And looking at, we didn't find information about the expense in Europe because there was not a specific study on that. But in USA, the travelers with disabilities spent $34.6 billion in 2015, increasing by nearly 170% just in 4 years. And after the pandemic, it increased even more after 2022. So the potential is very high. As we have seen, the EU market for travelers exceeds 100 million people, including the seniors and caregivers, 130, and including families and people with food allergy is more than 250 million people who travel every year. And there are a lot more who could travel but are not traveling. And the potential growth in accessible travel, so 60% of people with disability are financially and physically capable of traveling, so they could travel. And 12.5 million people with disability actually travel, and so this is expected to grow. So we need to address their issues, and we need to make this number even increase, giving solution to all people. And apart from the travelers, we found that three main groups will benefit from universal design. So of course the travelers, but will gain greater accessibility and inclusion. They can travel comfortably and safely, and they increase their travel opportunities, of course, but also for institutions and policymakers that could actually enhance the economic growth and competitiveness of their territory. They can improve the branding of their destination, and we see that in the next presentation. They can align with policy and policies and sustainability goals that are at the moment increasing in this direction. And they can also find funding and investment opportunities if they are following this principle. But most of all, last of all, benefits for tourism association and SMEs, because they can have higher customer satisfaction and loyalty, so people will come back to their countries and spend again in their companies. Of course, they can expand their market and increase their revenue. They can they can be compliant to all the regulation, and they can save costs in the long term, because investing in universal design reduces the need for expensive modifications later. I think this is very important, because if you start planning this way when you make any investment, then this will be long term and the cost will reduce in time. So I think this was just a summary of what we discovered, but I think it gives a key insight on what's universal design and what's the importance of addressing these problems. And so we're here exactly for this reason, to disseminate and increase the knowledge, the awareness of this approach. And we hope you're bringing all this knowledge in your work to start doing something and improve experiences in tourism and beyond. So thanks.